and that's really a process of collaboration and being guided by science and evidence. So the document that you have is something that was created. It sprang from CDC guidance, the Kansas Department of Education reopening guidance. We started by taking what Johnson County had put together, and kind of that was our initial basis. And then we turned it over to our local medical experts, Dr. Marcelino, our health officer, Dr. Scrimshire, an infectious disease doctor with the Lawrence Memorial Health, and then the University of Kansas's pandemic medical advisory team. And that's a set of about 10 physicians, not only at KU Med Center, KU Health System, throughout the width and breadth of the KU organization. And these are experts that have guided not only our work but Johnson County's work, and they've been supporting a lot of different efforts throughout the state of Kansas. So we feel good about the expertise that we've been able to leverage and use to create the guidance. It talks about, I talked about evidence-based, and so we leaned on public health literature. And so we've broken it up very similar to the Kansas guidance, because I would say we were ready to release our guidance when the state guidance came out. And so we quickly had to kind of take a pause and regroup. And my advice or my direction to our medical advisory team is look at our local guidance, compare it to the state guidance, align where you think it's proper, and then but really work to not make it be in conflict with the state guidance. And so I would say, I say that to say we leaned on their best judgment, their professional judgment. So we didn't just say rubber stamp somebody else's document. This is our local document. And so with that, we have a green, yellow, orange, red kind of framing of this. Green being all systems go. You have the recommendation to operate schools in an in-person manner. Yellow is that next step down, where we call a hybrid, where schools are free to just kind of frame and decide what hybrid means to them. But in a simple way, it means you've got half of your students working online, the other half in person, and you're kind of working them through so that every student gets some in-class experience and it's not all virtual. At least students that choose to participate, there's always the option to go to virtual. Orange and red are really around conditions in our community or schools are to the point where we feel like the risk of disease transmission is too high, and we're recommending that you go to virtual only. Where it gets a little more complicated than that, because it's not just are you open or are you in hybrid or whatever. It's all the different things that happen during the school day and even after when you get to sports. So we have rows in there around extracurricular activities for elementary, middle school, and then high school. And it's important to note when you look at this, please remember that currently we're in phase 3, and we have a mass gathering limit of 45. And so when it talks about in yellow, no all school activities, that technically that really applies in green as well, because we still have that mass gathering limit. And so when you get into a all school assembly or whatever, and you get over 45, we're saying even in green to not do that, to manage those assemblies in different ways. I kind of talked about sports. That really seems to be something that people are paying attention to right now. And so we've broken up sports in a similar way to the green, yellow, orange, where there's high risk sports, moderate risk sports, and low risk sports. And as you can imagine, the further you go down that color code down to red, the more restrictive the recommendations are for activities, athletic activities. So high-risk activities are discouraged in anything beyond green, and those include things like football, basketball, cheer. There's a list on page 3 that I won't try to just recite from memory. And what I will kind of go through is, high-risk sports are sports where there's close, sustained contact between participants. There's a lack of barriers and a high probability that those respiratory droplets, that how the disease is spread from one person to the other, will be transmitted between participants of that sport. So high risk just means that. We've taken a look at how the nature of the way the sport is played and the way participants engage in that. And when there's that close sustained contact and no real barrier protection between one person to the next, that's what makes it high risk. A moderate risk would be you might still have close sustained contact, but you have protective equipment, or there's some sort of either behavior or equipment, something, an environmental piece that reduces the possibility of particle transmission between participants. And then low risk sports are those where you can do it in a socially distant fashion, and you can clean equipment between sharing, and things like that, or cross country, some elements of track and field, and swimming and golf, those types of things. So those are all included in the color-coded chart, and they kind of dial down as we go up in disease transmission. The disease transmission, the gating criteria, those first 4 rows, get a lot of attention, and we get a fair amount of questions about them. And and this is really where we wanted to not conflict with our other partners around the state. And so you will see, if you look at other guidance, a pretty high conformance to that 5, 10, 15 kind of stair-stepping of percent positives. We didn't go, you won't see in our guidance a numerical number or number of new cases. We talk about the trend. Is it stable or declining or increasing? Douglas County, we need to acknowledge that we're a community that has the University of Kansas in its midst, and that we just have a different environment than other communities, so that when 18,000 students get tested over the last 10 days, which just happened, and we just released literally probably less than an hour ago our daily case report, where we had 140 some new cases, all from the KU student cadre. Just go off of case count was going to probably not accurately represent the environment and the risk for K through 12 education. And this is a K through 12 education document. So we did not include just the numerical number of new cases. We talk about the trend. There's been a lot of interest amongst school superintendents throughout the county about local conditions. That's where that absenteeism column or row comes into play. This is asking you to look at your historical absentee rate, say like last year's, and compare it with what you begin to see, as the school year opens and progresses. And when that absentee rate starts climbing above what is expected, that's a criteria for moving, modifying the operations to reduce the risk of transmission. And that is a piece that the new development there is that the Kansas Department of Health and Environment has worked throughout the state to provide a platform and a mechanism to provide that information to you. the percent positive tests and the new cases we've put on our website now. So if you go to the Lawrence Douglas County Public Health ldchealth.org website, and I can send the URL to Patrick or Dr. Lewis so that you can have it directly linked. You'll see a page where we talk about what phase are we in based on the information that we have right now. So right now we only have 2 of those 3 criteria to go by, but we would say today it's green. We update that every Thursday, so it would be a weekly update that you could look at. And again, that's posted online. You might also see online a Smart and Safe Reopening Douglas County dashboard, but that is different than the school reopening dashboard, and that can be confusing. And we are having conversations about how to kind of make sure that we're communicating as clearly as we can, and looking at how we might, how we manage these 2 dashboards. But they're different, and they're different because that the Smart and Safe dashboard was created in a different time for a different purpose. Its purpose was to really help us walk through that reopening phases. We started in a stay-at-home order, and then we went to phase 1 and 1.5 and 2, and now we've been kind of stuck in phase 3 for a while. So its purpose was to guide us through those community phases. And then, of course, the dashboard that the other one's really specific to schools. We recognize that first dashboard was created several months ago, really back in phase 1, or excuse me, before phase 1. And if you were to look at our epi curve and look at the number of cases that we get every day, you will see that back in those days, we were getting less than 1 positive case a day. And so our expectations of what we could hope for were probably over optimistic. And so for weeks now, when you look at our community metrics on that Smart and Safe dashboard, they've been red. You'll also see that the healthcare, the hospital metrics, they've been typically green, and they're still green today. That was part of the original purpose of this effort, to respond to COVID back in March and April, was making sure that we had a functional, operational healthcare system that could manage the people that came down ill. And we've been able to do that. And as we've gone along, we need to continue to try to help this community become as normal as it can. And so that's why things have morphed over time. I think I'll pause there, and I'll if I can, I'll ask Sonia to add in anything that I've missed, and then see what kind of questions there might be.
Hi, I don't have anything to add. I think Dan stated it all very elegantly, but I'm happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Are there board members with questions?
Yeah, this is GR. I just have one question. So you don't have to answer it now if you don't want to, because I know we're short on time, and that's fine. When you were talking about the classification of high, medium, and low risk sports, what sources did you use to make those determinations? Because some of those classifications don't match some other classifications that I've seen from like CDC and NFHS and that Children's Mercy have put out in terms of high versus medium versus low. So I'm just curious what sources you use to make those determinations.
It began with this summer, I don't recall when, the Kansas Department of Health and Environment worked to release guidance for the mainly Parks and Rec departments, that we're trying to operate over the summer. So it started with that guidance, and Dr. Scrimshire and Dr. Marcelino reviewed all of that and then made some choices, recommendations to Unified Command to move certain sports into different categories. So, but it starts with that Kansas Department of Health and Environment document.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other board members? And I have Paula and Carol on my phone as they're trying to get logged in, so they may be sending texts or speaking up while I am. Shannon, do you have questions? You are muted.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Dan, one of the things you touched on was the data from KU, and it seems as if that data has been slow in being released, and obviously some things that have been in the paper indicate that they're not necessarily sure that it's complete because of how students are reporting their addresses when they're being tested. So how comfortable are you that the data that we're getting now from KU is giving us a full picture of what's going on?
Well, I think it's more accurate today than it was Friday. And actually, Sonia was trying to explain all of this to me earlier today, and she's going to do a better job than me. So if I can pass that hot potato over to her.
Sure. So we have a natural lag time that occurs when between when a positive case is designated as a positive case from a positive lab result to when that lab actually gets routed to us. So once we realized that we didn't think we were getting as many of the positive cases as we should have been, we reached out to KU, and we've been working from an actual line list where they have sent us the names and the addresses that the students reported so that we can crosswalk their line list with our line list, and then we can chase down the cases that aren't in the county that wouldn't have been routed to us. So we feel really comfortable now with our numbers, as Dan said. And I believe George just released George Diepenbrock just released our new numbers, and they do show an increase in cases from Friday, which is a reflection of us feeling like we're getting a better grasp of the cases. So I would say what we're going to be releasing from now forward is going to be more accurate than what we were seeing like 10 days ago, for instance.
Kelly, can I ask a quick follow-up?
Yeah.
Where are the places that students are getting tested and are, for example, are they getting tested at the student health center, or do they have to go to a county location in order to do that?
I am not 100%, but I know it's not Watkins. So Watkins is seeing the patients who are symptomatic and need clinical assessment and medical evaluation, which is appropriate. They should be going to a health center. But this is for the large surveillance testing of asymptomatic students. And so it was the saliva-based test that I believe they could run at home.
Yeah, I think
take that with a grain of salt.
Most of the students did it that way, and then faculty were tested at LMH West.
Yeah, and then the students submitted to, I believe, CLR Labs is who KU had the connection with.
And is that only going to happen just the one time, or is that supposed to happen again?
To the best of our knowledge, they are only planning on doing one mass kind of surveillance of the whole population. We have not heard that they plan on doing another one. So from now on, will be targeted surveillance testing. So if they notice an outbreak, they might do testing in a Greek chapter or a dorm hall, or the contacts of a positive case, or the athletic team, for instance. But this kind of large everyone testing, there are no plans to my knowledge to do that again.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question related to testing? So that seems, again, like it's reactive rather than being trying to be preventative. And as public health folks, when you think about the opportunity to do testing when you have an outbreak, that's a component of what you would do in terms of like contact tracing. But when you take our sports teams or our students coming into our larger buildings like the high school, is there a recommendation that there be more regular testing so that we ensure our staff and students that are participating both in activities and athletics, but also those going into buildings in large number are safe. There is a critique from the KU faculty and staff that the testing at KU is inadequate. So I would like to hear both a response to whether or not there is enough testing in Douglas County for KU and whether or not the school district should be doing preemptive testing for our students that are more likely to be in larger groups of people.
What the first question was whether there was sufficient testing for KU. KU did that on their own, so they did not have to work through us.
I'm wondering about your feedback as the health department and if you would respond to the critique that they are not doing enough testing that we have seen come to the public from faculty and staff, that the one-time testing is not enough.
So I think we've been pretty open that we are against universal testing of large asymptomatic populations. So I would say in both situations, we prefer a more targeted a targeted testing strategy. I don't know, Dan, would you have a modification of that? I'm looking for you.
No, I was waiting for you to provide that answer, and yeah, I stand behind it as well. The CARES Act money that has been is working its way through the approval process does have funds in it for LMH Health to continue testing and offer it to K through 12 school districts. So while we're dubious on the value of all of that universal testing, there are plans in place to continue to provide it.
So when you think, so one aspect would be the universal testing, so I appreciate that. But if you're looking at then something that's more targeted, that's not reactive to an outbreak, but rather if we are having like 45 students practice for a sport, is there a reason why we wouldn't have testing for those students on a more regular basis?
Go ahead.
Well,
would you recommend that?
Well, I believe it comes down to a resource question because testing has limited value with each day that passes since your test, because this is a disease spread person to person. It's highly infectious, and the test doesn't provide any guarantee that next Tuesday you won't be exposed, so that's our concern about the testing, that it might lead to false confidence and then more risky behavior. I'll let you add anything to that, Sonia.
So I would just add that a negative test is really only good for the day that you take that negative test. And there are a million things that can go wrong that can lead to a false negative. We don't see a lot of false positives, but we do see false negatives. One could be that testing, specimen and collection is subject to human error, just like anything that humans operate and work on. So you could have like a faulty collection. Another false negative could be the result of the fact that testing is designed to catch positive cases. So it is designed to work best with somebody who is symptomatic and has symptoms and wants to be tested. So if you tested somebody 48 hours prior to their symptom onset, when the virus has been incubating in their body, you run the risk that that person has not developed a sufficient viral load to be detectable on a test, because that's just how tests work. However, 48 hours later, they could retake the test and come up positive then, or become actually symptomatic at that point in time. Those 48 hours, they have been not only infectious, they've been highly infectious. The most recent scientific literature suggests that somebody is most infectious in the 24 hours before they become sick, which is how COVID can be so infectious, because people don't realize they're sick when they spread it, which is why we do all the recommendations for non-pharmaceutical interventions like wearing a mask and social distancing. So I hope that helps clarify things a little bit.
That's great. Thank you. We've gotten a lot of questions about that, and that was very helpful. I appreciate it.
And I'm happy to draft that into an email or something if anyone needs it, because I know it can be kind of complicated to just hear it over a webinar or whatever.
Sure. I'll take you up on that. That would be great if you would do that. Thank you. Other questions from board members? I'm going to ask one more clarifying question then. And again, these are questions I have that have been coming to me from the community. And Dan spoke to this and I appreciated it, but I just want to make it, sometimes I ask questions twice to make sure that they're heard in the way that they're asked. So we have had a question about the gating, what gating criteria the board will rely on. So Dan talked about the versions of criteria that are out there in the public. Can you just say one more time which criteria you would say that the board should utilize when we are making decisions about what mode of learning students are in? Thank you for repeating it.
That's a great question. I'm interested to hear what Sonia says.
If I understand the question correctly, I would say our criteria is what you should use, right? The one that we developed is unified command within Douglas County. Yeah, that's what I assumed, but I wanted to make sure because you can see folks are looking at what's the different area. You can see it's challenging, I think, for us to communicate, and certainly helpful when you think about the communication that you offered to draft around testing. Similarly, this is a really challenging thing to educate folks on when they're looking at what looks like disparities between what red means here, what it means there, what it, it's similar to the phasing. Now we have these colors that are creating some confusion for some folks. So I appreciate your assertion that your criteria is the one to follow.
If I could toss something in that you triggered in my head, there was always this kind of conflict between what's the most accurate, most sensitive measure in the world and volatility in that measure, because that makes no sense to be green today, yellow tomorrow, green the next day, red the next day after that. And so I think we understand that you have a challenge in front of you of how to manage volatility over time. That's why we did 14-day rolling averages and things that were a little more stable but less sensitive. And so, that's where we say it's science-based, but there's an art to this as well. And that's kind of knowing, how to take the science and turn that into, managing a school or a school district. So you get the artwork. Okay.
That's actually why the board made the decision to do 6 weeks, was because of that 14-day period we thought with KU it was part of the component, that 6 weeks of being able to see testing results from KU after a couple cycles in that way. So yeah. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, you'll see that the KU testing has driven our percent positive down and our new cases up. So that would take you in two different directions in the guidance.
I think Carol and Paula are almost in or nearly in. Are there any additional questions?
Dan, this is Erica. Thank you and Sonia so much for your presentation. It's always so helpful and informative. Did you say that you're going to update the Douglas County Smart and Safe School reopening every Thursday? Is that what you said? So once a week?
The school one. I don't know that we have a catchy name for it.
Okay.
The Smart and Safe one is Sonia, correct me if I'm wrong, that's all part of our My Sidewalk platform, and it's
every Friday.
Manage that.
Okay. Okay.
The school one is on Thursday, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Kelly, can I ask one more question? Jumping off of what Erica asked, you mentioned something about sending the URL. I couldn't find the school piece on the website, so that would be really helpful.
Okay, I will get that. Who should I send that to?
Dr. Lewis. I see him raising his hand. Send it to
Yes,
Dr. Lewis.
you send it to me, Dan. I'll make sure they get it.
And then,
All right.
and then you noted something interesting, and it is a question I've had about how those gating criteria work, which is with this newest testing data, our cases are going up, our percent positivity has gone down. If that situation were to persist over the 14-day period, how would we interpret the guidance in terms of what it's telling us to do, what it's recommending that we do, in terms of staying green, going to yellow?
Sonia, can you, I'm a terrible multitasker. I'm working on this link.
I was multitasking too, looking for the website. I believe, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but I believe that the current recommendation is to default to the most cautious level. So there might be, green here, red here, and you would want to default to the cautious side.
Okay. All right. That's helpful. Thank you.
Kelly, can I ask for a point of clarification from Dan? This is Anna.
Uh-huh.
The 45 limit gathering, is that both indoors and outdoors or social distancing? I just got a question regarding that. And outdoors, can you clarify that, please?
Oops. Dr. Lewis, I think I just sent it. Tell me if it doesn't show up. We've interpreted it or enforced it as an indoor order only. I think a lawyer could push us into a corner that says we didn't make a distinction, but that's been how we've operationalized it. Outdoors, we talk about being socially distant and spreading yourself out.
Thank you.
I received the link, Dan. Thank you. I'll forward it on to board members.
All right.
Other questions? Okay. Really appreciate the work that you're doing to help keep the community safe. I think that it speaks volumes that we are safer than some of our peers in similar college communities and also around the state. So thank you for the work that you're doing and giving us such reliable information to base our decisions on.
Thank you.
I would echo that. Thank you so much, Dan and Sonia, for being here. You're more than welcome to hang out for the rest of the party.
Okay, we'll continue on. And our next portion will be sharing how the new gating criteria will affect our changes, our reopening plan. I'm going to ask Dr. Anna Stubblefield to speak on this a little bit.
Evening. This is
Hey, Dr. Stubblefield, before you jump in, yeah, thank you. I just wanted to make sure the PowerPoint was loaded. You couldn't read it.
There we go.
okay. Good evening. This is Anna Stubblefield, and I recognize the time, and we still have a lot to cover for the reopening. So what I'm just going to say at a very high level is that the gating criteria and the specificity around what schools need to do, we recognize there are parts in our reopening plan that we need to update and or fill in. Some of those things include like cohort groups, transitions, breakfast and lunch, arrival and dismissal, and common areas. We will take these items and the other ones back to our task force groups and we'll update them to align with the gating criteria. Our plan is to follow the gating criteria unless the board were to tell us to do otherwise. So we would go back and make sure that our plan aligns with the gating criteria. The other component that I know that you've received a lot of emails, and I've been either CC or email around sports in regards to what happens. I did reach out to Keisha today. They are meeting. Keisha is going to take a alternate plan to their board of directors. I think the next time they meet is September 16th, according to their website. And they recognize that there are several districts that have had to, large districts in particular, that have canceled or pushed pause on their fall sports. And so they will have an alternative for districts that have to cancel fall sports due to COVID. I did ask about those districts like ourselves who we have some stuff happening this week. What happens and if we do engage and then have to push pause, will we have the option for spring sports? To participate in fall sports in the spring. And they said there will be a drop dead date is what they called it. They did not give me the date. But unless they release the proposal prior to the 16th so that you'll know the date before the 16th, this is Anna, not Keisha. I'm assuming the date would have to be after the 16th unless they told us something before the 16th of September. So they are working to accommodate districts that either won't get an opportunity, students who won't get an opportunity to participate in fall sports and or for whatever reason have to cancel the fall season is what was shared with me. They are aware of student athletes who participate in multiple sports that, you may have somebody who plays volleyball and softball or football and run track. And what they're trying to do, there's always a little carryover, is that the right word? Crossover between some sports. There may be some crossover, but they are, I believe, my understanding, their goal is to allow those athletes to be able to participate, or the students engaged in activities to be able to participate in both by how they set up the alternate option. We are all waiting to see what it is, but they are aware of that in their planning. So that's just very high level. We know the gating criteria will change those things. Keisha their next meeting is September 16th, but they have been public about presenting an alternate opportunity for students in the spring.
Can I ask a question about that, Anna? So we've got copious emails around sports concerns and considerations. So I just have I have a couple of questions, but one that's related to what you just said that isn't high level, but very specific to the district. If you have a team where, like we had with cross country, where we have some positive tests on that team, the whole team is asked to quarantine, correct? So when you're in a competition, when you start to be in the mode of that will interfere with the player's ability to proceed into. They can't go back. Is that what I'm hearing? Like they can't say we weren't able to make this go this fall. We can't join the spring alternative.
What my understanding from Keisha, like cross country, they're quarantining now. They have not competed in any competitions. I think it will be a limited. So let's say that they got all the way through the season and they had 2 competitions left. I would assume Keisha would say you had the bulk of your season. Keisha is going to actually give us a date that say, if you compete after this date, you won't be eligible for the fall, is my understanding. For the spring.
And
and we don't know that date yet.
And our students that quarantine, they are quarantining at home, not participating in practice, and not participating in school when school starts. They have to be virtual. They can participate in school, but
yeah. So I just got a text. Thanks, Mr. Graver. Keisha's vote is happening this week on spring option. They moved the meeting up this week. So we'll have more clarity this week. I think this week they'll say districts will have to make a decision. Like they'll say by this date, you need to make a decision. And if you go past that date and then have to quarantine, you won't have the spring option. So districts will have to make a decision once they release the date for the spring option. So thanks those out there watching giving me up-to-date information. I hadn't spoken with them since this morning. So yeah, so in that case, Kelly, it just depends on what that drop dead, whatever the reason, if it's beyond that deadline to say I'm going to do spring, it prevents you from finishing the season. That's the unfortunate reality of the situation. So once we have that information, we'll be able to engage and look at our schedule, and then look at, honestly, the competition opportunities, and try to make the most informed decision. Right now we're in green, so all of our sports are a go. The way that we thought that will be the most beneficial way to give parents and coaches and teachers an opportunity to operate is if it's updated. I think Dan said they update it every Thursday. If it shift the phase, we would implement it the following Monday in order to give people a few days to adjust. That is what we discussed in ELT, and so that's just what we were thinking around that, because we recognize we can be in green this week and then go to yellow. And if we were going to go to yellow, it will be effective the following Monday. So if the kids had a competition or something on Friday, they will still do it. And then if it impacted them on Monday, we would shift. That was just a conclusion that we came to, which I know has pros and cons, but you have to have a transition time at some point.
Okay. And to specific scenarios, we will be talking about those kind of as we go through the presentation. So I'm going to hold that second question I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we're going to transition into some discussion of special education, and Kevin Harrell, our Director of Student Services, and his team will be presenting on this topic.
Good evening. I'm Kevin Harrell, the Executive Director of Student Services and Special Education. Tonight, we're going to give you a brief update on special education, talk about some timelines. We have some teachers that have agreed to discuss and talk about what services might look like for a student with an exceptionality. And then we're also going to touch on how we might determine how services might be delivered. Next slide, please, Patrick. So we've received lots of questions about what does special education services look like for students with exceptionalities. In trying to answer that, here's some assumptions that we make sure we think about. First, all students are general education students first. So whatever is decided for all students, that's where we start. So if remote learning is assigned to all students, we start there because there's lots of things our general education teachers do in implementing instructional strategies like universal design for learning, blended learning, things like that. Some of those strategies actually will help meet the needs of students with exceptionalities in a remote environment. So those are things that has to be considered first. And then considering education, special education is a service, not a place. And so when we start thinking about special education, we look at specific services. So we look at what's happening with the student and look at the individual services, and can those services be implemented in a remote environment? And some can be, and some are more challenging. And we'll talk about some things we're going to use later in this presentation. Also, we got to look at the purpose or the purpose of a goal or service. And so we may need to look at how we provide that service in a different manner to meet the purpose of that service. Also understanding that decisions about students with exceptionalities are made by the student's IEP team, which includes the parent. And those decisions happen at the building level, and it's based on the student needs and the data. And understanding there's no scenario which applies to all students and meets the needs of all students. We've also received lots of questions about what does para service look like, and for some of our areas, like some of our specialized classrooms, it may be easier. Some of our resource situations may be a little different. We've got to look at building schedules, look at what those look like, look at the students, what their needs are, collaboration with the general education and special ed teachers, team discussions, and then look at how services will be delivered and then look at who and how that's going to be delivered. And so when a question comes of what does it look like, it's difficult for us to say what it looks like because it really is determined on an individual student basis. Looking at some of our timelines, prior to the board meeting on the 27th, our focus was really general education was looking at a hybrid model. So a lot of our time and effort had gone into that and working with other districts that were considering the same thing at the time. Once that changed, it changed a lot of the things in our focus. It changed the impact on legal requirements, the processes and procedures. In the beginning of the year procedures, it had a lot of impact. So we had to go back and look at all of our process and procedures and our training. And so we couldn't really offer any guidance to our teachers till they came back. And so they didn't have information to share with families, and we couldn't make those decisions from a district level. And so we started meeting with our special ed administrators, our facilitators. We brought in some staff, special ed staff and work groups, which Laura will talk about later, to look at what needs to be done, what needs to be put in place. And we were kind of in a quick timeline, but we managed to get a lot of information done. We also met with our parent advisory group a couple of times over the summer. We met with them once prior to the board meeting on the 27th, and then we've met once after that. So there was some discussion of what that looks like, and I think it was good conversation. And then last week, we had the opportunity to provide professional development to our teachers. So we've had some staff agree. You can, next slide, Patrick. Staff agreed to kind of talk about and give an example of what special education might look like for students. Our discussion really is that this is not what it'll look like for a student. These are just examples. We want to make sure that everyone understands that, our staff are worried that if I say this, then people are going to think this is their student. And so I'm going to ask you to be careful about questions because they really don't want to get into where they're talking about a specific student, because all of our staff have families that they're working with. And so understanding that our buildings have different schedules. The staff we have some resource staff. We have one of our specialized classroom, and also a related service provider that's going to give an example tonight. So we will start with Catherine Glidewell. Catherine, are you there?
I am here. Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So as Kevin said, I am a resource teacher at Langston Hughes Elementary. I work with grades kindergarten, first and second. And I'm just going to share some ideas of how services would be provided and the coordination that it takes to do this. I obviously didn't put times or limits on the activities that I included because we are not sure what times will be for each student contact time or when these will occur in the school day. So I'm just sharing a list of services and supports. The student we are looking at has support in both the regular education setting as well as receiving support in the resource room. Patrick, can you come to the next slide? Specifically for reading, decoding, and comprehension from the resource room. And then all the rest would be in the classroom. The supports I listed are for brick and mortar, but also need to be supported in the remote setting. These supports are pretty seamless in brick and mortar, so we need to think of how we could make this seamless in the remote setting. As we look at the sample schedule, next slide, I look at the 4 areas that the student would receive support in the brick and mortar setting, and then put them in during the touches the student would get in the regular education and special education throughout the day in remote learning. As you see, the translation is pretty easy and mirrors what happens in the classroom. And I kind of picked an easy example to make it easier for you guys to follow. So on the next slide, we'll look at how we would meet those needs, and this gets a little tricky. In order for this plan to work, we have to make sure that the adult support is comfortable with using meeting spaces as well as strategies to help a student in a virtual classroom. There needs to be a lot of communication between general education and special education on what happens on each of these sessions. For example, the special education teacher would need to know the questions asked during a morning meeting and what activity would happen so the student with special needs is able to fully participate. That way, the adult support could take a student or a small group into a meeting room and make sure that they know the question and have an answer, or maybe even coordinate with the family and send the question ahead of time so that the student has an answer before they even get to the morning meeting. If this support happens in the small group setting, the adult support could also make sure that the student understands the activities for the day and how to participate, kind of our check-in system for some students. Then they would also need to be able to navigate back into the classroom so that the student has the ability to share and participate fully in the meeting. And navigating WebEx is, that's a big learning curve for us right now. This same concept may be used in the reading for the student. The collaboration between regular ed and special education will need to be well coordinated, since we can't just walk down the hall and make a quick adjustment to the students to make the student successful in the classroom. The small group for special education would run close the same way it would in person. It just requires a lot more planning and keeping students engaged, the materials needed, and making sure that students would be able to access the group online. We would also need to know the concepts and pacing of the math from the general education teacher so that we were able to make the accommodations needed so that this student could be as independent as possible in math as they are in the regular ed classroom. The final piece of the puzzle would be meeting general education teachers and knowing what their asynchronous learning would be and how to best support the student with modifying the materials that they are providing, or even providing alternate activities that are at the student's level and meet their IEP goals that they are currently working on. We also have to teach how to use the apps to support their learning. Not all kids have been used to this, so using the apps are sometimes something we're going to have to figure out how to learn online. So just as we looked at what it takes to provide support for one student with special needs, now you have to take into consideration that special education teachers have more than one student on their caseload, and they have to make plans to meet all of their individual needs. We have more than one teacher to collaborate with, and also paraeducators that we are working to train, support, and guide. I've always said that I like a challenge, but this year will not always be a challenge, but it will be a push for all teachers to adapt and redefine how we teach. That's a big shift for us, and as you have heard, it's changing every minute, and we are continuing to adapt and change plans accordingly. Thank you for your time, and now you'll hear from Jacob.
All right, thank you, Catherine. Catherine was just sharing with you some perspective from the elementary level. At the high school level, you know, our settings look a little bit differently. So what I'm going to try to kind of talk you through a little bit is how are we able to provide as close to sort of like as predictable of a setting for these high school students with special needs moving into an online setting. So I teach at Free State High School. I teach freshmen through seniors. I keep the same kids on my caseload as from freshmen all the way through when they graduate with mild to moderate disabilities. And each of our classrooms in brick and mortar typically has two teachers. For instance, it's me and my teacher who shares a classroom with me is Ms. Culbertson. And so the way that we're setting up our online setup, there's a little bit of flexibility to it, but I can speak to exactly what I know Jennifer and I are doing, and I know many other teachers are using this model as well, is we're having a shared Google Classroom page for all of our kids to be able to reference as sort of a resource hub. We are going to have one WebEx room with one login that kids will be able to move in and out of throughout the day. And we will also plan on working with students one-on-one in breakout rooms. Each of our special education teachers at Free State High School has been assigned a para to work with, and those paras are available to us throughout the entire day. We'll have them sitting in on some regular ed classrooms when they need to really kind of get some information to assist a student. They'll be in our online space available for one-on-one work in breakout rooms as well. I'm sure we'll come up with plenty of more uses that we haven't quite figured out yet. This coming Friday, we are going to be presenting a short professional 15-minute, I believe, professional development. The SPED department will be to just kind of tell the regular education staff a lot of sort of need to know information about how our classrooms are functioning this year and how to help them help the students access us when they need to, because they do need to access us at varying times throughout the day. We have actually collaborated Free State with LHS in creating about 8 lessons for the first 2 weeks of school. And these lessons are specifically about online skills and tools. I believe there should be a slide on there, Patrick, that you can move to. Yeah, this is just an example. These 3 slides, go back in there. Yeah, of one of the presentations that we'll be giving our kids about organization. Of the lessons include like using online progress monitoring, such as Easy CBM. It includes a lesson on Google accessibility extensions, such as Snap and Read. The one I'm showing you from some slides from today are about online organization skills. And so anyhow, we've got some videos embedded in this that just sort of show them how to use things like Google Tasks. Is there another slide on there after this, Patrick? Yeah, and then this just as a slide, this is actually more text than I like to have on a PowerPoint slide, but this sort of summarizes those main points from the videos. And this is just a part of a 15 to 20-minute lesson that we'll be giving on one of those first 8 days of school to help them learn how to navigate the new online setting. And these are geared towards specifically special education sort of needs. I don't know. That's just kind of some stuff that we've created lately, and how our structure is gonna look like. There's gonna be a lot of hiccups along the way here, I guess. And this whole thing really, it's not a lot of fun, but you know, it's definitely a huge learning process, and we're gonna take a lot of skills out of this into learning for forever. A lot of these skills we learned this next year are really gonna stick with us, I think. So hopefully that's helpful, provide some perspective. Thanks. I believe that's on to Alex.
Yes, so my name is Alex Smith, and I am the specialized autism classroom teacher at Quail Run. During a typical school year, my classroom aims to have a similar daily schedule to guide the flow. Each morning, students carry out their arrival routine. This transitions into interactive morning meetings that focus on calendar, weather, and life skill concepts. Throughout the day, we utilize small group instruction, which embraces multisensory approaches. We also take full advantage of opportunities for inclusion with the general ed setting. As I designed continuous learning for students last spring and during the extended school year, I found myself programming their day in a way that mirrors what would have occurred if we were brick and mortar. In order to do this successfully, I needed to design engaging and interactive lessons such as pre-recorded morning meetings, as well as read-alouds that displayed both myself and the story on the screen. When my students were able to see my face on their screen, their engagement increased. Additionally, we developed musical movement Mondays and virtual field trip Fridays, all of which were housed on our central Google site. Don't get me wrong, it was not easy to redesign lessons that students with special needs actually wanted to engage in. In fact, many challenges arose. Providing families the resources and tools needed to facilitate learning, finding enough time to even create the lessons, and special educators' inability to effectively model, redirect, and reinforce students were just a few. However, I started to realize that no matter if we're teaching in person or remotely, there were and will always be challenges. During a typical school year, any special educator would agree that unexpected events require us to be flexible, creative, and willing to adapt at any given point. Personally, I've come to expect that many days will be unexpected. But this isn't a typical school year, so how can we make it work for everyone? I believe that we can continue to increase student independence through the practice of daily routines within their homes. We can provide social groups that focus on critical life skills and communication. We can have our students access engaging lessons through multisensory approaches, as well as participating with peers in inclusive settings, such as morning meetings and specials with general ed peers. We can do these things by proactively creating an effective learning environment for both the special ed students and the families that we serve. But to do so, we first need to reflect on the concerns and struggles our families faced in the spring by collaborating with teams and families themselves. During the spring and summer's extended school year, families shared with me that they often struggled drawing their kiddo into the learning activity. And I couldn't help but wonder if part of that struggle was due to the student not associating their home with school, as these are two separate entities for many kiddos. So I think I have a picture of Patrick behind. So we can create individual workspaces for students to utilize at home when engaging in learning activities. For example, a family pulls out something similar, a student might begin to associate the presence of this trifold display with the fact that it's time for learning. Additionally, these displays provide organization for those facilitating the learning, as well as offering the student the visuals, schedules, and reinforcement windows they use daily in our brick and mortar classrooms. I think we're all aware that remote learning cannot be solely digital, and this holds especially true for our students with special needs. The population of students require hands-on materials that allow them to bring learning to life through sensory modalities and manipulatives. I must analyze what my special ed students typically use to access learning and then creatively get those same or modified tools for them to use during remote. And we can go to the next picture. At-home kits can provide students with not only your typical school materials, but also things centered for more specialized instruction. Special educators and parents can take the time to create these at-home kits. And don't get me wrong, I get that this is a lot of work, but anything to increase student engagement, provide equity, and increase for those facilitating the learning, in my opinion, is beyond worthwhile. These at-home kits would serve as a supplement to digital lessons as they are necessary in order to maximize the full remote learning experience. We must keep in mind that special education is a team and it takes all of the pieces coming together in order to create a bigger, beautiful picture. One of the key pieces to the special ed puzzle is our paras, both in brick and mortar and remote settings during the time of remote learning. Our paras can fill key roles such as meeting special needs students in their Gen Ed WebEx meetings, and then going into a breakout room to help the student engage in the activity that was assigned. They can pre-record engaging lessons for story, music, and movement time. Paras can continue to prepare the needed hands-on materials that will supplement remote learning. Ideally, some might even branch out into the Gen Ed whole and small group WebEx meetings to monitor the chat and document student-specific participation and focus data, which I foresee will be much needed in the future. I touched on how special ed teachers are always ready to accommodate changes at the drop of a dime due to student and staff needs. Well, gone are the days of updating schedules, sprinting to the printer, and then distributing updates to staff. We can go to the next picture. We're now able to utilize tools such as Google Drive and Docs to update para schedules at any moment in order to meet the needs of all students and staff. This live schedule allows for our paraeducators to know where and how their support is needed, and it will successfully alleviate the challenge of staff not necessarily working together on site. Another key piece to the special ed puzzle is our families. Parents and caregivers need the resources and training necessary to not only provide instruction in academics, but also in the areas of related services. They need the tools to know how to successfully engage, redirect, model, and reinforce as we do each day in our classrooms. The special ed team can utilize virtual conferences and video modeling to help fill a family's teacher toolbox. So just in closing, I just want to say my classroom proudly displays the message unique potential within reach. I live and breathe this each day, no matter the difficult task at hand. Right now, we have the unique opportunity to take all of the skills we've developed and strengthened over the years in our brick and mortar special ed classrooms and generalize those skills into the home setting, which is the true ultimate goal, independence and success outside of the classroom. And that's all I have.
Next is Cami.
Hello. I think you can hear me, but I don't see my video popping up yet. Are you guys able to see me or just hear me?
We hear you.
Okay. Not sure why that's not coming on. My camera light is on, but I'll go ahead and get started. So I'm Cami Bible. I'm an occupational therapist in the district. I'm one of 6 occupational therapists that work in the district, and I'm here to represent related services, which includes occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, music therapy, and adaptive PE. We serve 2 to 10 buildings per therapist with over 50 plus students on our caseload throughout the district. So we're working with multiple teachers and special ed teachers, resource teachers to provide therapy for students who have IEPs. And our goal is to help students access their special education goals. So for example, we may have a kindergarten student who is working on writing their name, and they may have a visual motor or fine motor delay. And so what an occupational therapist might do in that situation is help the student with some like let's say they had muscle weakness in their hands because, and which was causing that fine motor delay, then we would provide activities that would help strengthen their hands, or so we're either looking at different kinds of remediation or adaptation for the student. Let's say it might be a long-term issue that the student's going to be dealing with. Then our goal is to get each student to be as independent as possible to access their education. And so we may look at adaptations. For example, if you still have a third grader who has very poor handwriting because of those fine motor delays, then we're going to be looking at speech to text or typing or things like that. And each one of our related services areas are pretty different, but our main goal is to make sure that students can access their special education goals. So what this may look like in a virtual setting is that we will be mainly seeing students in a traditional setting. We are doing mostly one-on-one direct service with the students. Either we are pulling them into independent spaces where we're working with them, or we are pushing into the classroom depending on what meets the need of the student best. And so we are kind of going to just shift that online. One of the things that related service providers are very used to doing is adapting and doing whatever we can to make sure that a student is able to access their education. And so that is going to be no different in a virtual environment. We will be seeing students directly via web conferencing as much as possible. And so I'm just going to speak from an OT perspective, since that's what my background is. But I would continue to set up a session just like I would face-to-face, where we kind of do a warm-up. We're either using some fine motor activities, visual motor activities to get the student ready to learn. Then we're working on their specific goals, whether it's handwriting remediation, visual motor remediation, things like that, or we're practicing those accommodations so that when they go back to the classroom, they have had specific instruction on those things. And then we always kind of end our sessions with a reward or free choice or things like that. So in a virtual environment, we'll be doing some of those same things. We'll be providing some motor activities that we can do together with the student via video. We will also have a lot of digital worksheets and things like that we can use. And Alex had a great visual with a lot of the manipulatives. We are also working on different manipulatives that we can either provide or have a list of home, a checklist for home use that a parent can go to different parts of their home and find different things like tweezers or scissors or things like that we could use for our therapy sessions. Because as far as OT goes and PT, music, speech, we're all pretty hands-on as far as what we're looking at doing. So really that part of it, we're hoping that we won't, we'll be able to do it the same in just a different way. But another big part of what we will be doing virtually is providing resources for parents at home. Last spring, during the time when kids were at home, we built a website for OT and PT, and I think speech did something similar. We had different disciplines had choice boards where we had a lot of activities broken down into a need-based area, whether it was that fine motor, visual, gross motor, brain breaks, technology assistance, where we provided links to activities that a parent could do at home with their students. So we will be providing that resource again this fall so that parents will have access to that. We will also be providing resources and consulting with special ed teachers and gen ed teachers to make sure that students are able to participate virtually. We're going to be looking kind of at that lens again for this time where we are virtual. So again, we've all been working really hard these last couple of weeks to build up our database of digital activities, making those lists and thinking about our students with high needs and how we can meet their needs in a virtual setting. But we are an adaptable group, and so I think we will be able to push through this as well. And I apologize that my video is not working. It did earlier.
Well, thanks, Catherine, Jacob, Alex, and Cami. Really appreciate it. As you see, we have some excellent staff. I think a lot of parents are concerned they're going to see what they did, they remember what it looked like in the spring. And one thing we can assure you that it's going to be definitely different than it was in the spring. With that, I'll let Laura talk about.
Kevin, can I just jump in really quick because it's 6:30? So I just want to tell everyone we're extending this section for another. We were about 20 minutes late starting, so we're going to go until 7, and to get through everything and not rush, particularly to give you all time to cover the questions that we've been asked by the public. So just interjecting that, and thank you to the teachers who came. I do have one question for Alex. Can I ask it really quick before she probably wants to pop off?
Sure. I will tell you, if it's about specific things,
it's
we
not about a. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's not. It's not that. So I have actually a question. It is specific to the population that you work with, but I've had a lot of parents who have a child who has autism, who have expressed concerns about the 360-minute day requirement. How do you individually provide consultation to families to help reassure them about what that day might look like? What does the individual consultation look like?
I think I need to learn this on my own moving forward. I think I spent a ton of time in the spring outside of contract hours, to be honest. So I think I'm still kind of developing that. But I think when I think like towards my caseload, I really try to figure out which kiddos have similar needs and try to create those guiding video models for parents and send them out individually, but basing it on a group of students that have a similar need. So if that makes sense.
It does make sense. Now, right? It does make sense. I have one other quick question for you. When you and this is probably to all of the teachers that spoke, is when you have a need that's because you have so many unique responsibilities. They're not unique. You have specific and specialized responsibilities. Are you working directly and collaborating with not just your peers and the teachers? I heard that, but you also are. If you need something, you go to your district principal. I mean, you go to your building principal, and then if there's something beyond that, that goes to Kevin. Right? That's the other question I got.
Yeah, I think we try to follow the chain of command and try to tackle things in-house and then branch out as needed.
Okay, I appreciate everything that you all are doing to make this work for families, and a very it's something that's been covered widely and talked about, and just thank you for trying to make this right for our students. I appreciate it.
This is Anna. Kelly, I just want to make one clarification. If students are interacting with their teachers during the live sessions, the parents do not have to keep that log because we're able to take attendance. So the scheduled times at the different levels, when they engage in those, they don't have to keep track of because that's how the minutes will be logged. So if they were in school, they're present, they did it. And so that is one thing that we will be strongly pushing and encouraging parents to do, as much as we recognize different families have different circumstances, but if they can engage in those live sessions when the teachers are with their service providers or their resource teacher, that takes away the burden of them actually having to physically keep a log of all of the minutes because we would have the information.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Okay, so I am Laura Basham, and I am the Director of Student Services, Special Education, and Early Childhood. And I'm going to cover a few things that actually might bring a little bit more clarity also to some of your questions, Kelly. As we think about the creative schedules and the opportunities that our teachers and providers kind of put forth, we do also have to remember that we need to make sure that we are keeping to offering a free and appropriate education, and that we are ensuring access, that all of our students with disabilities do have access to general education, and that we're making sure that they are progressing toward their IEP goals. Now, when we had the board decision to shift to remote, what we needed to do is look at temporary plans. All of our teachers will be looking at IEPs specific to each student. They will be looking at services, and then they will be looking to see how those services translate to the remote setting. What we're going to do is make the assumption that the service can be provided remotely, and then that's where the creative thoughts and the creative problem-solving process begins about breaking down those barriers so that our teachers are meaningfully engaging our students. We do also have to make sure that we're keeping to all of our state and federal guidelines, timelines, paperwork, things like that. So when we think about what services could look like, if it's remote or if the service is in a hybrid setting, there is a problem-solving process. And what we need to do is look at how to determine those services. Our teachers do have, we spent about 3 full days in training with our certified staff last week. And so our teachers just received information about how to start that problem-solving process. They do have questions to ask, kind of in a worksheet format, and we are encouraging teams to exhaust all possibilities, making sure that we're keeping the focus on remote, because as we all know, it's been deemed not safe to be at school. So we want to make sure that we are providing a meaningful remote education. And we also want to really consider the feasibility of what that is. Honestly, we could have some students that for whatever reason, we have gone through the problem-solving process. We have tried to break down barriers. We have offered materials, supplemental supports, strategies, interventions, and we might have a student that for various reasons might not be able to make progress toward a goal. And that's a reality. And so when we think about the questions we ask, if we could go to the next slide, Patrick. The first question is, can we provide the service remotely? We want to, again, make the assumption that yes, we can. And then if we're running into obstacles, we start breaking those obstacles down and we start really problem solving and getting creative. We need to make sure that we are offering a free and appropriate education. And then if there is a service that the team has gone through and said, you know what, we've tried remote, we've tried various breakout rooms, various check-ins, we've worked with a parent, we've done some coaching with the parent, we've provided some materials at home, kind of all of the fantastic things that, as an example, that Alex put up with the trifold to replicate. This is the school setting to kind of have a child's mind click into school where they're no longer at home. And or if there's a specific, just a specific service that can't be provided and the team is not able to make progress with the student, the next question would be, is this something that we absolutely have to do right now? Is it timely? Is this imperative for the student to be successful? Because of course we want all students, not just students with disabilities, we want all students to be in schools. We don't want to be in the middle of a pandemic right now. We could wash it away, that'd be fantastic. But the reality is we can't. So we do need to ask, is this timely? Does the support have to be in person and in place right now? And if the answer to that is yes, then we need to ask the question about how can we mitigate the safety risks in order to bring a child on site to provide a service or a portion of a service? Does bringing a child on site outweigh the harmful effects of exposure to COVID? And those are going to be really difficult conversations to have. Our teachers will be having those conversations in teacher teams with special ed teachers, general ed teachers, and absolutely parents as well. And we do anticipate that some of those questions or some of those discussions will be difficult discussions to have, because of course our heart wants to say absolutely yes, we want our students on site. Our heart wants to say yes, this is a way to circumvent the board decision to be remote. However, we're going to have to make sure that we're sticking to data. We're really investing in that problem solving process. We're working through barriers. We're getting creative, and we are providing services that within the constraints of the pandemic that we are able to given our circumstances. Next slide. So in order for some of the things, I know Kevin alluded to some of the work groups that we had going on this summer, and we've been busy, as everyone has been. We had some special ed teachers that were part of our workforce groups along with the general ed teachers. But then when you think about special education, we have so many variances of different services, different lenses, that we really needed to make sure that we were trying to, as much as possible, prepare for what we might be encountering. Now, of course, we put every effort into projecting what we think we know. We realize that there could be some situations that we really haven't figured out yet. We're absolutely ready to respond to those as we need to. But through some of our work groups, we have looked at some additional or different types of PPE or safety protocols for some of our students or groups of students. If we're looking at when we're looking at coming back in hybrid, or if it is a determination for the slim few that might be coming on site. We also had some groups looking at how our para is going to be utilized. You've heard some of the examples of how they could be utilized. And again, Kevin said, and I want to make sure that we're hearing that how paras are used, it's really going to be driven by student need. And so it's going to look highly individualized based on the student age level, grade, and then their need as well. And then also some of the other things that came out of our work groups this summer were looking at some of the equipment, specialized equipment, but then specifically resources. We were able to say, okay, if we're remote, where are our holes? We need to be able to, as much as possible, be able to reach those students. We kind of learned real quick in the spring where some of our holes were. You will see that tonight there is on the consent item, there are a couple resources. One of them is a platform for related services to be able to use. It's a TeleXL EBS system for our related service providers. And that would give access to our SLPs, OTs, PTs, and actually social workers with some strategies, some activities, and digital means to be able to reach students remotely. We also have a math resource, Bridges, that we're looking to, we're seeking consent for tonight so that our teachers can teach math and remotely, and then also progress monitoring skills. And it is an adaptive program. So we're really excited about adding some additional programs so that we can improve our reach and we can improve the engagement for students with disabilities remotely during this time. Next slide. And this is just to make sure that we want to make sure that we do give accolades to all of our groups. Each of these bullet points represents a group of people that really provided input, feedback. They were, some of our special education facilitators were integral in helping us to determine really where we need to go. And they're helping us continue where we need to continue going as we learn what we don't know and respond to that as well.
I include special education. Are there questions?
Questions from the board? I have a comment. I got feedback that the meetings that you were holding for parents have been really effective and have helped people understand a little bit more about the direction, as this is challenging for families to navigate as it is for you all as well. So I wanted to give you that feedback. It was very positive, from staff and families as well. And then I have a question. So we talked about the safety of the, a consideration if we had to do in-person services for a student. And certainly we recognize the risk in coming in person, but how are you working with staff to identify what staff might be willing to come in and provide direct services, given a student is assigned essentially to a particular cohort of folks that are their support people, like they have a social worker, in special education. How are you working that through with people as you navigate those questions around in-person services?
We have not gotten to that point yet. Teams have not met, and I think it will depend on the school. I know we're discussion with our principals was as that discussion is being had and looking at the needs and those different things that at this time they should consider how that's going to work in their building. And so that's where we are now, and making sure each building has a spot to if a student comes in, that the administrator at the building, that's been discussed.
Okay, thank you.
This is Erica. I don't have a question, but I'd like to just take a moment to say thank you for all your hard work. I can tell a lot of work went into this. And not only have you taken like a solutions-based approach, you've also made sure you've centered the student and you've centered around the cultural beliefs of the district. So I just want to say thank you for all of your hard work and really appreciate it.
Okay.
This is Paula, and I don't necessarily have a question, but just more of a comment. And I agree with Erica. Some of the resources and information you provided to us, I think, is very valuable. We'll be putting that up on your website soon. You'll be adding any type of additional resources to that so that parents can easily access that.
Yes. Yes, we will. We've had a discussion not only with our parent group, but also at the district level of looking at the resource page and sharing some of that information. So yes, we will, and we will continue because we're constantly getting new resources, and our parent group are actually finding resources and sending to us to add to the resource list. So.
So my other comment too is I've heard a lot. Again, Kevin, you're doing a great job. How paras will be used based on student needs. Have those paras been engaged in discussions about how that will look for them? And I asked that question because we voted to recognize the para. I'm sorry if I missed that. My internet has been in and out. If you mentioned that, I apologize.
And no, we have not. Our focus has really been on process, procedures, legal aspect, and responsibilities. All those rely on principals and certified staff. They're responsible for what happens with all students. If something is not done right by a paraeducator, it goes back to them. They determine what that looks like, instruction looks like for paraeducators. It's different for everyone. And so first, all those things happen at the IEP team level, and then it's determined how it's going to be done. So we have not had a discussion because our focus has really been on resources for teachers, processes and procedures, and what needs to be done.
Paula, I will say that as we speak, or starting last week, Dawn was scheduling a meeting for myself, Kevin, and HR with PAL leadership. To talk through some of this background here and the fact that what paras are doing actually has to be driven by student need. and just balancing what that looks like. So we do, I think we were trying to meet Thursday or Friday or early next week with leadership or representation from PAL.
And we have worked with our staff and our teachers and looking at professional development opportunities for our paraeducators that align with some of their responsibilities, possible responsibilities. But again, I think Alex may have mentioned it, is that the teachers will take some of those and assign them to the paraeducators really based on what those responsibilities will be.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks, Kevin.
Okay, I think it's okay to continue on, and I'm going to ask Zach Conrad to talk about student enrollment, and Hannah will be visiting about staff preference.
Thank you, Patrick. Zach Conrad, Executive Director of Data and Technology. So with the option that the district has provided, the 3 options that are provided by the district, when we come out of distant learning for the first 6 weeks or whenever it's safe to do so, we have provided 3 options for families to enroll in a hybrid, and that's 2-day schedule, AB day, a distance learning for the term, and if you're elementary, that means for the trimester, and if you're secondary, that means for the semester, and distance for the year. So with this, the purpose of this was so that we can identify the students who would like these different options and be able to pair them with teachers and get them registered or enrolled in that. So we created in PowerSchool a field in there so that we can identify which student and family has selected which option. So this chart is showing us, or this table is showing us that we have about 2,155 students within PowerSchool that have not selected an option yet. We have 5,702 students, or 54% of our students, that have selected the hybrid option when it is safe to return. 1,760 students would like to remain distant learning for the term, and that's either semester or trimester, depending on the grade level. And we have 882 students at this point, or as of 5 o'clock, that have selected distance learning for the year, or about 8% of our students. So we had this enrollment open for a week. After that, we have buildings reaching out to families directly to help identify which option these students would like. So we are continuing to update that on a daily, on a minute by minute basis. So as these schools reach out, they go directly into PowerSchool and they change that option. And we can continue to run reports at the building level so they know who has yet to respond so that we can plan accordingly. Are there any initial questions over the enrollment?
Yeah, Zach, this is GR. So the last time when we talked about this survey, if I remember correctly, we had talked about that at the end of the survey, those people who didn't respond would be auto dropped into the hybrid option. And so based on this, that 5,702 number are people who actually responded either via survey or via phone call to hybrid. That's not something that we assigned them, and the 2,100 are the ones that are currently unassigned because they haven't responded in some fashion. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we ended up creating another option within the PowerSchool. So we had 4 options, and that way we could better keep track of those that didn't respond and follow up.
And GR, I will say, at all levels, they're working to contact those families because we know exactly who they are. But for planning purposes, for staffing, we counted them with hybrid because we had to start to make schedules and we had to count them somewhere. So we couldn't just leave them hanging out there. So right now, until we hear from them, we are planning like they would be in the hybrid form whenever we would go there.
Yeah, and I
We
can.
have the gift of time for the first 6 weeks to try to connect with them and prior to that.
Yeah, and I can verify that schools are making those phone calls because apparently I don't know how to fill out the survey.
I feel that. So can you just say that piece again, Anna? You can follow up with people as long as 6 weeks. I'm having a number of parents call me and say, or contact me and say, I can't rightfully fill this survey out, and we talked about this last week, until I understand the exact certain scenarios. Like there's a positive COVID case in my kid's classroom. What is the district going to do specifically for my in that scenario? Or how certain other, like what is the gating criteria? They were waiting to see those pieces to put together before they made a decision. So what I'm hearing you say is that there will be ongoing outreach to families, and that if families are taking longer to make a decision, there's not something punitive about that.
Correct. We just would, for planning purposes and staffing, we're just counting them with hybrid, although we're not in a hybrid. We haven't said we're transitioning to hybrid. And as more information comes out, we recognize that families, they may very well have picked something and say, now that I know more, I want to do something differently. And in those cases, as long as staffing wise, we can accommodate it, we will. Right now, we're still in the space of we can accommodate it because we haven't started. And then also everyone is starting remotely or distantly in that fashion. So yeah, it's not punitive. It's just that we had to move forward with staffing so that teachers can start to know what their assignments were.
I really like this approach. Thank you for taking it. I think it's really smart.
Kelly, can I ask a question? Anna, is in terms of that process, when do you think you'll be able to let staff know, those who've said, I want to work remote for the semester or the year, versus if we go to hybrid, I want to go to a hybrid model along with the students? Do you have a timeline in mind of when you might be letting staff know about that decision making?
So that's actually transitioning us nicely to our next slide. Staff preferences. So there were a couple of things. For those who needed ADA accommodations, we absolutely can accommodate them if they need to work distantly for the year. HR and building principals started contacting those individuals today. And we started with core teachers or like special ed and ESL and title. They will be in the process of contacting them in the next couple of days. But if you look at the data, and when we looked at our staff preferences who would like to teach remotely for the year or the term in comparison with the students, because it has to match the student, there are very few preferences that we could accommodate. I would say we could not accommodate about 90%, and if Dave is on here can chime in, 90 to 97% of those who prefer to teach remotely, just because of where the students fall. Now, as we learn more about those 2,000 individuals that we are working to accommodate, depending on where they fall, we may or may not be able to accommodate more preferences. But right now, we understand the staff has a varying level of comfortability, but we're just in a situation where we have to match the student needs with the entire master schedule. But those who needed accommodations based off ADA requirements, we were able to make sure that they have options, to accommodate what was needed for those individuals.
Okay, I think I understood that. So in other words, so where we're at right now, you're saying is that unless you had an ADA-based request, you are likely not going to be accommodated in your preference.
If your preference was to teach 100% distance, if you want it to be distance the entire year, yes. You're correct. We would not be able to accommodate that at this time.
Okay, so do we have any idea whether that means that those staff will choose not to teach at all?
I'm not sure about that because we are just starting to contact individuals today. I don't know what it means. I mean, right now, everybody is distance. Once, as we contact them, I will say that Dave, it's on here, HR is having conversations with individuals, and it looks different at each level. Like at the high school level, for a variety of reasons, everybody may have, well, those who are not those with ADA accommodations, but it may be a blended schedule just because of what you teach. You may have a distance class, even if you are in person, because of the nature of what you teach. So I don't know if those staff members will choose not to teach, but I know the reality of it is I don't know how we accommodate them and then meet the needs of what students and families are have indicated as their need. So that's a difficult situation that I think districts across the state and the country are currently facing when the two don't match up.
One more quick question then. Have we considered allowing teachers to pair up and co-teach? Since my understanding, and Patrick, you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but my understanding is that based on the gating criteria, even if we continue to be in the green after our 6 weeks, if we are required to have social distancing requirements in our buildings, that means we're still going to be in a hybrid model until social distancing is no longer required. So in that scenario, we're going to have 3 days a week of remote learning for all of our students who are in the building. So are there opportunities to accommodate potentially those staff people by pairing them up? And because we're gonna have kids learning from home 3 days a week in a hybrid model.
Honestly, when we looked at how we were doing staffing, if you do that, then potentially when you start to do that, so I think about the variance of what students need. So if they're pairing up, like if you and I are pairing up and we're sharing these 20 kids, the kids that I would have been teaching on the backside, because you can't have more than 17 in a space. So if my normal caseload, if you subtract those who are in distance learning, if my caseload, I'll use 20. For instance, I have these 10 kids on this day in person. Those other 10, if we're pairing up, it's still 20 kids somewhere that don't have a teacher, if that makes sense. Because we both have 20 kids assigned to us. So there are 2 sets of 10 kids in person both days that somebody is going to have to be instructing in person. So if we're pairing up, I can't have 20 kids in the class because the gating criteria says no more than 17 in a space.
Okay, I don't think I understand. So I think maybe I need some follow up on this outside of our work session because I'm not following you, honestly. I'm sorry.
Right, but between the 2 of us, we will have 40 kids assigned to us. On any given day, 20 of those kids are in person. All 20 of them can't be with me and you take the other 20 remotely. You could take the other 20 remotely, but I can't have 20 kids in a hybrid classroom based off the gating criteria. So I need 2 adults there to split those 2 groups into 10.
I think what I'm saying is that you're going to need 2 adults anyway, because we're still going to have to be doing something with those kids during those remote days. And so
Yeah, but that's where our support staff, some other curriculum and some other things, you still need two unless we're going to hire double the amount of teachers that we have, almost the co-teaching. There may be a scenario like in a very small school that, I mean, when you have a very small group, you could do that. But when you get to your larger schools or your larger grades with caseloads, the numbers don't work out. So there may be scenarios like that, absolutely, but we can't just universally say, yes, we can accommodate by pairing them up. And then when you get to specific content area, if I'm the only teacher that teaches something, who am I going to pair up with? So you run into different scenarios around that. But we can definitely talk about it and we could show you the numbers. But can that happen for some? Possibly, but universally, unless you're going to add staff to it, it doesn't work out when you start to look at the ratios.
Okay, I'll follow up offline. Thank you.
And so our support staff, their preferences fell like that as well. And again, because most of our support staff, when I say support staff, I'm referring to the classified staff, their job responsibility it's driven by the student need, and there are absolutely portions or some of them that all of it will work for them to be remote, but in some cases it just doesn't work out like that on a day-to-day basis. So we're looking at the different classified families, and then the day-to-day schedule for some who like paras will be driven by the student need, and the principal and teacher collaborating to create those schedules.
So if there's no questions, we'll move quickly to professional development, our last section for this evening. I want to thank the board for giving us the gift of time when it comes to professional development. Typically, we plan for one building day and one district day, with moving back all the way to September 8th for a start. We have 72 hours of professional development time. We provided 28 hours of teacher work time, or will provide 28 hours. We have 8 hours for our teachers to prepare for virtual conferences, and 24 hours of parent-teacher conferences. All of our professional development opportunities had online and virtual options. You heard a little bit about synchronous and asynchronous. When we talk about synchronous, that's what we're doing right now. This is synchronous instruction, or digitally face-to-face, or right now. Asynchronous options provide times for students or learners, adult learners in this case, to learn new skills or learn new ideas at their own pace on their own time. So many of the things that we offered were available then. We've set up a website that has many of our presentations with the recordings and the resources on the website. So if teachers wanted to go back, maybe they just wanted to see something again or refresh, or maybe for whatever reason they couldn't watch it at the time, they can go back and do it again. Our approach to this professional development was extremely collaborative. We started with our working groups and task forces and said, what do you need to be ready to teach in the fall? Our district and our building administrators worked collaboratively. We sort of erased this idea of building and district days and said, how can we work together to make sure our teachers are as prepared as they can be? And then we made sure that we had paraprofessional options. And paraprofessional options were available both in a synchronous format and asynchronous options, and could be designed with their supervisors. Here are just some of the topics that we were able to provide or are currently providing in the next couple of days. I really applaud our principals and our staff for being flexible. You'll see on their WebEx, the second one down on the far column, And it says 1.0 and 2.0. We heard early on that, boy, it would be sure nice to have a little bit more of that. We didn't quite get enough. That was some of the first training we had. Could we get another dose of that? And worked with our IT department to provide that and provide room in the schedule for it. Our professional development this year has been provided by our educators. And that includes, as Jacob pointed out, their colleagues, so they could hear from their colleagues about how they're problem solving and what are some choices they can have. They've been working together in content areas or working groups by grade level. It's been provided by building and district administration, and that includes all divisions. So our student services have provided that professional development, our IT department, our curriculum instruction department, our facilities department is going through COVID protocols, and HR has been involved as well. So really a teamwork approach to this. Our instructional coaches have provided professional development. Our equity affiliates have talked about conversations about race. We really leaned into our Lawrence Virtual School staff. They have experience on creating relationships in a virtual environment and are providing that for many of our schools. And finally, our new peer-to-peer instructional tech support team. These are 38 teachers who committed to over 32 hours of training this summer to support their peers. Research tells us that the best kind of technology support is one-on-one mentoring. And so these teachers are paid, and their colleagues are paid for that extra one-on-one mentoring to help you through that technical support. I've invited a few of our principals and teachers to join us tonight to just give a couple of minutes. I know we're short on time, but I think it would be really valuable to hear from them. I reached out to Lindsay Buck, our LEA president, and asked for a couple of teachers who she thought could share their thoughts on our professional development. And so Mackenzie Pfeiffer is here from Sunset Hill. Carol Ruman is here. We had a different teacher for Southwest, but that teacher was sick today, and Carol is a member of our peer-to-peer team and stepped up to help us. J.C. Robertson, our Woodlawn Elementary principal, and Kristen Ryan, our Southwest Middle School principal. And they're just going to visit with you a little bit about their impressions, both what's going well in professional development and anything that we can learn from. This has been an awesome task to do so much professional development at one time, and we can certainly learn and get better from it. So we'll start off with Mackenzie.
Hi, so as Patrick mentioned, my name is Mackenzie Pfeiffer, and I am a special education teacher at Sunset Hill Elementary. Special education teachers had a rough beginning when we started on August 12th. The challenge was that our general education colleagues, I'm sorry, what? I thought I heard something. Okay.
I think you actually did. Patrick, can you mute yourself?
Yeah, that's a little tricky to show full screen. Give me just a second. I think I can.
No, I'm sorry. I just needed you to mute yourself.
I'm working on it.
Okay.
Continue on, Mackenzie.
Okay. All right. The challenge was that our general education colleagues were receiving guidance on what the beginning of the year would look like on their end, while special education teachers waited anxiously of when we would receive guidance on what our jobs would look like. We were also receiving phone calls and emails from parents asking for information on what the 2020-2021 school year would look like for their child. There was a shift in anxiety levels when we had our first special education professional development last Tuesday. Our special education district leadership modeled transparency, empathy, and vulnerability. Special education facilitators like Jenna Viscomi and Mallory Johnson were readily available and extremely helpful when I needed to discuss service narratives, temporary plans, and programming for students. Hearing the calm of Lori Stidham, Laura Basham, and Sheila Smith's voice made me feel better, even if the answers to a lot of questions are still unknown due to COVID-19. They were also able to show us that everyone struggles with WebEx sometimes. One struggle that I have encountered since I received special education guidance is the lack of time I am with my general education colleagues. I am attending different sessions to receive training on important procedures and to receive further guidance on special education, but I am then missing out on professional development sessions I need, such as information on new district benchmark assessments. I also have not had a sufficient amount of time to meet with general education colleagues to discuss and explain the guidance I have received around special education and collaborate on how to best meet students' needs. As we move forward with this school year, we are bound to face new barriers, challenges, and questions due to COVID-19. I know that we will be able to overcome these challenges if we continue to show each other grace, transparency, and collaborate to problem-solve situations. I fully believe that by receiving this strong professional development, I have been given a great starting point in the school year, unlike any other. Thank you.
Thanks, Mackenzie. Now I'll ask Carol Ruman to visit with the board.
Hi, I'm Carol Ruman. I'm a 6th grade ELA teacher at Southwest Middle School, and I also am a member of the peer-to-peer instructional coaching team. And so this summer I attended Avid digital technology training, and I did some ISTE training as well. And so both of those were really helpful. So I took myself, and Jamie, who's also another P2P teacher at Southwest, we took our training and we tried to turn it into useful information for the teachers in our building. And so there's 2 parts that we tried to incorporate when training our fellow teachers. One is to give them examples of digital tools that they can use in the classroom for distance learning. And the second is to provide an example of how to run a distance learning classroom, the setup that goes into it, the routines and things that will make it successful for both the teacher and the student. So it's been really good so far. We've gotten a lot of good positive feedback that what we're sharing has been helpful and is helping them navigate what a virtual classroom needs to look like. It's also been really good to work with teachers in small groups because there were resources and funding available for us to kind of work one-on-one with teachers and help them with specifically their needs. Some hiccups we've run into is one is a lot of the things that we've been introduced to in our trainings at Avid and ISTE were paid programs. And so Jamie and I have been trying to develop workarounds for free versions, which have a slightly limited options for teachers to use. So adapting what we learned in the summer into free programs, which sometimes works and sometimes does not. And the other just feedback we get a little bit is that they wish they just had a little bit more time to play around because in addition to all the beginning of school things, the new technology for some teachers is harder to learn and things like that. So just a little playtime. And of course, all of us, as we all have, meeting fatigue. So sometimes that sets in and our brains shut down. That's all I got.
Thanks, Carol. Appreciate that. JC, are you available?
Yes, thank you, Patrick. My name is JC Roberson, principal at Woodlawn Elementary. When asked to present tonight, I surveyed a brief survey to the elementary principals and the Woodlawn staff. So what I'm about to say is their words and a little bit of mine. So this year's PD overall had received very positive feedback from the elementary principals and the Woodlawn staff. Principals and staff alike appreciated the option to be at home or in the building. Some were self-guided and self-paced. The virtual option was great as there was no internet or parking issues that we sometimes experience when we're all in one place. And it was a great use of time, and they appreciated the opportunity for classified staff being able to participate in many of the PD options. Overall, they appreciated the time and organization. Thank you, Darcy, and the staff PD to harness our greatness. And they are very excited about the conferences. Many are wondering if they can do those every year at the beginning of the year, those virtual conferences, and we haven't even experienced them yet. So a lot of positive feedback from that. Some helpful hints noted from the principals and staff for next year would be that, as you have heard tonight, more training on WebEx and having classes rostered into platforms. So when we have PD on an item, our kiddos are already in there. And this year provides lots of challenges for that for obvious reasons. So Overall, very positive feedback. They appreciated the extra time, the flexibility, and the ability to hear from their staff, from their peers, excuse me, to harness all the greatness we have in the district.
Thanks, JC.
Yep.
And finally, Kristen Ryan from Southwest Middle School.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Kristen Ryan, principal at Southwest Middle School. And I did share with Patrick earlier, in my 9 years at Southwest, this is the most aligned, explicit, and just well coordinated in terms of back to school PD. And I know the efforts that it took to make this happen in such a short amount of time, and the manpower and the people. But with the learning coaches, the peer mentors, and so many different teachers that have stepped up to help, it's just been really inspiring to me. Do we have our challenges? Definitely. I do want to say some of the examples of the PD that we've received, from equity and engagement to increasing building relationships, a focus on AVID strategies, Wicker specifically on the O of organization, that the importance of being organized as a student is going to be so critical. We've talked a lot about that at the middle school level. The content collaboration has been extremely helpful. And also, just with the increased PD, our paras have received more access to PD. So it's just built everyone's capacity and understanding, which before we just had such a short amount of time to get all of the information in. But with that does come the challenges of learning so many different ways to teach, and the amount of time that it takes to implement and either understand a distance learning platform tool, but then to apply it. And we talked a lot about, as a staff today, this week really needs to be spent on application in terms of what they need in terms of time to implement everything they've learned over the last 2 weeks. I do want to share, can I share something, Patrick? Sorry.
I think that's a Joe question. Joe, can she share that? Yep.
Can you see this, Southwest? Sorry, this was, maybe not. Can you not see it?
We can.
That's okay. What I have noticed is that staff is taking prior knowledge from PD and district expectations and building expectations over the last couple of years, and continuing to make their classroom and their delivery even better. So learning targets, essential questions, really taking those strong instructional strategies, and they're continuing them in the distance learning model, which is I really, really appreciate. So I think that's about it.
Thanks, Kristen. Appreciate it. Board members, any questions that you have? I've got to get sharing abilities back, Joe. So I don't have a slide. Oh, there it is. Now I have it back, but now I think I've lost my PowerPoint. So any questions you have, board members, about our professional development?
This is Shannon. I don't have a question so much as a comment that with all of the positive feedback from our staff about the time that we've given with our PD at the start of this school year, I know that meant some trade-offs in other areas in terms of our student schedule, but I certainly, speaking for myself, would be really interested in having conversations going into next year about how we could replicate some of the best things that you all have found out of this extra gift of time in terms of building our calendar for a non-COVID impacted school year. That's all. Thanks.
So yeah, I think thanks for that, Shannon, and I would agree. This is a real celebration of our educators here, and I think we've heard it a couple of times. The way they've stepped up, the way they've supported each other, the great work of our principals, and meeting the needs of our teachers has been really excellent. Well, this wraps up episode 4 of Together Again, and you can see our next steps. Our virtual parent-teacher conferences you heard about will begin September 1st. On September 8th, classes begin. September 14th, we'll be back for another Board of Education update, and specifically, we're going to try to bring you some information on student and family engagement. How are we connecting with our families? What kind of levels of engagement are we getting? And then on the 28th, you'll evaluate the model and the community spread data. We talked about that last time. So thank you for your attention to this. Thank you for all of our presenters for sharing, and all of our educators and our building principals for joining us. If there's any questions, obviously we're still here to take your questions if you have them.
I just want to echo Patrick. Thank you all and all of our teachers and the administrators that were on tonight, both for all parts of this presentation. As you can see, this is definitely has been a collaborative process. And Shannon, to your question, I think I've shared with board members, as soon as we're done with getting school ready, we should begin thinking about, as soon as we get school started and going good, we should begin thinking about next year and presenting a plan. I will say a large part of the PD portion of that is something that we would have to work with our LEA on in terms of a negotiated agreement, including that amount of PD time in. And of course, we also are held again by our 1,116 hours that we would have to adhere to. But I think what this does is provide us an opportunity to see what is possible, and then just put our heads together and really recreate school that in a post-COVID era that will benefit all staff, students, and families involved. So thank you all.
So I have a question before we leave. The one thing that didn't come up tonight that we have gotten a lot of asks about, and maybe it did come up and I didn't tune into it quite right. If families want the practices and procedures that will follow decisions around COVID-19 in a building, in a classroom, I know I've asked this a couple times tonight, but that is not available to families yet to review, correct? We
just received some final guidance, final draft. I would say it's probably final from Education Unified Command that speaks to what we do in terms of closing a school versus closing a building.
Okay, and so the timeline for that, when do you expect to see? When would you expect for families to be able to review that based on what you've gotten about what you need to make it available to the public?
As far as the document, it's final. It's just a matter of us putting it together, because it's about 13 pages, and a lot of it includes higher education information. And so just taking the guidance there, again, it's just guidance for us, taking the guidance there and developing our own plan of action. But I will say that we are working closely with the Lawrence Douglas County Health Department when we make these decisions.
So that families will be able to review that.
Yeah, we'll post our final guidance on our website as well and send it to families.
Is it like, are you thinking that you're 2 weeks out? People are asking us about a timeline for that specifically.
I don't want to speak for Julie and her team of getting a easy readable document. You're taking those 13 pages, condensing it to what our families, what our district needs. So I would imagine in the next week or so.
Okay, great. So I think people are wanting to see scenarios. They're wanting to see, like, my kid's here, then what happens next, and then what happens next, or what can we anticipate as a family. So this was really great tonight, and I appreciate everything you all did. It was really helpful to me. That was the one thing I would say we're still hearing from families, and luckily we have time to do that. So thank you all very much. Is it okay, Dr. Lewis, for me to transition to the next section? So I would like to give everyone a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and get started on the formal agenda. that agreeable?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Kelly.
This is Carol. It's fine.
All right, thanks everybody. See you in 10 minutes.
Carol, are you with us? Yar, Shannon, I see. Paula and Carol, are you here?
I'm here. This is Paula.
Okay. Did we hear from Carol? I had my headphones.
Oh, hello, I'm here. This is Carol.
Hey, that's everybody this time. All right.
I know, we're gonna get it together.
Not on my phone. That's
Good Lord, thank you so much.
Yes. Okay, so I'm gonna call to order our meeting, which is very delayed, and we're gonna make an amendment to the, we're going to propose an amendment to the agenda given that. So I need some technical help with that, and I have asked Elise and Shannon for their expertise. Before we called for the approval of the agenda, do we make the motion to amend?
You'll approve the agenda with the removal of your item.
Okay, so prior to doing that, I'm proposing that because we do not want to in any way shortchange the equity conversation, and we had a long conversation that was really necessary earlier, I'm asking if board members would consider supporting giving equity a little bit more time and moving it to the upcoming board meeting so that we have adequate space and energy to really dive into that topic.
So the motion would be to approve the agenda with the removal of 5.1.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I can do that.
Hold on just a moment, GR.
1 second.
Okay.
Dave.
Hold on.
I saw his camera come on, so I was going to wait.
So you're just moving it to a future board meeting. You're not removing it from discussion purposes permanently.
Yep.
You're making a motion to approve the agenda with the delay of that report to the next board meeting.
Okay.
Are you brave?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm good. No, I'm good.
You want to repeat that full motion though, so Elise gets it all, or I can do it if you want.
I don't have an issue doing it. I'm good.
Let's do it. Go
for it.
I'm waiting for everyone to stop asking me if I'm okay doing it.
We feel comfortable with your ability.
Some of you do. I move we approve the agenda for the August 24, 2020 board meeting with the delay of 5.1 district equity update to a future board meeting.
I second.
Okay. Oh, this is Carol. Yeah, go ahead.
I think we'll need to do a roll call, right? For all of our votes tonight.
Sure, I can do a roll call.
Okay.
Hill?
Yes.
Kadu Blackwood?
Yes.
Gordon Ross?
Yes.
Imbo?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Okay, we're going to move on to the report of the president. I just wanted to share with the community as we begin to look at the updates that we're getting from the health department and are exploring getting ready to potentially move from a remote learning format to a hybrid model or in-person model that we'll be discussing later on in September. In the interim, we as a board will continue to, as you could see all the progress that we have and the momentum we have toward the 6-week remote period that allows us both time to develop distance learning skills and also time to really refine our safety protocols for the upcoming year, hopefully just the upcoming year. There is not intention on the part of the board to, in my read anyway, there's not intention on the part of the board to step back from that commitment to the 6 weeks that we made, both to the LEA, to the community, as we look at what happens as the KU students return and as we begin to move into what will be an unprecedented year. As I say that, I want to acknowledge the significant equity considerations that we have in front of us, and that we are mindful that this is a decision that has consequences that we have to try to mitigate to the best of our abilities. And it's my hope that we return to my personal hope as a single board member, that we return to a hybrid model after the 6-week period, because I can agree with all the voices that in-person education is the best model for our kids. So with that, I will ask and plead with our KU students who we love very much and have missed for the last 6 months being in our community, that you act responsibly, wear masks and social distance, so that your community, our community, and the K through 12 education can open up its doors fully in the 7-week time frame, or at least in a hybrid model. So that is what I have to say in that regard. And then the other issue that we have had come up to us as a board is around sports and activities. And then you also heard earlier in our conversation during the work session, there is an intention on the part of the board to move away from our commitment to let Dr. Lewis, the health department, our athletic directors, state officials, and the league guide our decisions around when activities happen, when sports happen, what it looks like for spectators, what the travel looks like for our athletes, and that we'll respond in a way that we think best protects not only them and our student body, but also the larger community. So this question we are getting around choice, individual family choice, it's definitely bigger than that. So there will be moments where things may be disrupted from normal, and we're asking for you to help us have difficult conversations with our students, but also to celebrate the activity and the sport and athletics that they do get to participate in. So that is what I have for this evening. And I'm gonna now step aside and let Dr. Lewis share the superintendent report.
Thank you, Board President Jones. Last week, we had our first ever virtual, and I said our first ever and hopefully our last fall staff convocation was done virtually. It was well received and viewed live by 785 screens. The video has since been watched by an additional over 1,500 screens. I certainly appreciate Kelly's personal and heartfelt comments, as well as Lindsay Buck's remarks on behalf of the LEA. And I do appreciate the board moving or postponing our equity report to the next board meeting. As I indicated in my convocation remarks, we have to prepare our students for 2 pandemics when they return, obviously the COVID-19. And our conversation is what we want to have around race and our equity work that we've been doing in this district for a number of years. And we want to give it the same attention that we do with our Together Again, because it's going to be hugely and vital to all of our scholars, staff, and families that we continue to focus heavily on our equity work. The district will follow the same procedures for COVID positive cases that we've used to communicate about our safety issues. And with that, we notify the board and staff and the families of the affected location. We were notified last week of 4 positive COVID cases, and this included 3 LHS students and an ESC staff member. 2 of the student cases were athletes on a cross-country team. And because the team had stretched together without proper distancing, we were unable to identify those potential close contacts. And so in collaboration with our Lawrence Douglas County Public Health, they asked us to inform the team that they must self-quarantine for 14 days. And consequently, LHS cross-country practices have been canceled until September the 3rd. Our communications team will be adding a section to our coronavirus website where the public can go in the future and find a list of positive cases by date and location and the safety procedures we have in place to respond to those positive cases. In order to support high school students in a remote learning environment, We're pleased to again be working with the 1 Million Project to provide high-speed internet hotspots and free 10 gigabytes of wireless data per month. High school students who lack that reliable connectivity at home are eligible to use the hotspots for up to 4 years. And any students that's interested must complete a survey and return that completed survey and sign permission form to the school library. Students should contact this, their high school library media specialist for information. And there's also more information that can be found on the high school's website. We have worked with community partners this year to collect donations and distribute school supplies to needy families in our schools. Families do not have to sign up or they do not have to qualify. They just simply notify their school that they need these supplies. And in return, the supplies will be waiting for them to pick up at their school. So that's different from in the past in terms of them qualifying and filling out a lot of paperwork. Just identify the need and notify the school and pick up the supplies. The district has started moving dirt for the construction of the William Dan Playtown. This is a safe and inclusive playground for early childhood programs, students and little ones in the community. The playground will be built at Kennedy Elementary School and named for one of our longtime donors to the pre-K program, William Dan. The Lawrence Schools Foundation continues to raise funds to support this project. So anyone that's listening, any of the 225 people that are watching this board meeting live, you can make a tax-deductible donation, and this includes donations for a commemorative brick. So if you want a commemorative brick that will be there, that will outlast your life, those donations can be made online at the lawrenceschoolsfoundation.org. Some exciting student news. We're thrilled that LHS students Gracie Flanagan and Catherine Steinman have been selected to serve as the U.S. Youth Ambassadors for Special Olympics North America. Lawrence High also has been notified that it has been named a National Banner Unified Champion School for its commitment to inclusion through its Unified Sports and IPS program. We will plan to, board members, recognize LHS at our next board meeting. A Free State student, high school student, was chosen as the Kansas winner of the Doodle for Google national competition. Senior Elliott Smith is one of, I think, 54 in the state, out of the state and territory, winners across the country. Her doodle was selected from thousands of entries received this year for the theme, I Show Kindness By. A public vote helps determine which students will go on to become one of the 5 national finalists and win $5,000 college scholarships. The national winner will have their doodle featured on the Google homepage for a day and win a $30,000 college scholarship and a $50,000 tech package for their school. So we're still wishing Elliott Smith good luck on this. Some more exciting student news. Erica informed me that Fiona Swaggerty, which is a 2020 LMH Health Leadership Academy graduate, has started permanent employment with LMH Health in the admissions department. She is helping out that team by screening until she transfers to a part-time position at the new LMH West facility. She certainly got in there, rubbed those elbows with the right people and leveraged that experience in that academy to earn a permanent position. It was really based on her skill set. And so she landed that permanent position right out of high school. She also is planning to attend Johnson County Community College this fall. And so our partnership with LMH Health is definitely a success story, continues to be a success story. And so we definitely, again, appreciate Erica for her leadership in this. The Lawrence Schools Foundation received a donation from Main Street Credit Union that assisted staff members needing food, support with utility bills, and temporary housing as a result of the pandemic. We certainly appreciate Main Street's donation. One of our community, our community volunteers, which includes D. Kemp, or he is affectionately known as D, a Free State security officer. He's restocking those free little libraries that you see around town, and he's restocking them with books featuring Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. And so the group also will be building an additional 10 to 15 little libraries in locations where none are currently found. So thank you so much, D. Kemp, and all of the the donors that have been donating books to that cause. And then lastly, as you know, the United States Census Bureau is ending all efforts for the 2020 census on September the 30th. And this is a month sooner than previously announced. This is disparaging news for our community and our school district. And when we know that when we respond to the census, we are helping our community get its fair share of, I think it's over close to $680 billion a year in federal funding. And not only does it help hospitals, roads, public works, and other vital programs, many of our businesses use census data to determine if they want to build in Lawrence or build factories, offices, stores, which consequently will create jobs for the area. But I'll tell you, as superintendent, it's important that I advocate for everyone to take the census. The census is a direct line to funding for programs like early childhood, special education, free and reduced lunch rate, and a plethora of other programs that sustain and benefit our scholars and families. And so if you have not taken the census after this meeting, please do so. If you know of any neighbors, family members, or friends that haven't taken the census, they can take the census at my2020census.gov. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, so I have to say I saw those little libraries getting stocked, and it was so cool. So I'm really grateful for that, and some of the other good news that you were sharing. It's good to hear the good things. So thank you. Erica, can you take some time to recognize our retirements?
Yes, of course, happy to. The Board of Education recognizes the following staff members with sincere appreciation for their years of service and devotion to this community and its schools. Stephanie Cotter, sorry for that. Prairie Park teacher, 32 years of service. Katarina DeBoer. Cordley Para, 9 years of service. Suzanne Jeanette Nelson Smith, Kennedy Para Early Childhood Education SPED, 4 years of service. And on behalf of the board, we'd like to thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Okay, we do not have patron commentary tonight, so we're going to open it up to board commentary. Are there board members who have news to share?
This is Erica. I have a few things to share. So on August the 11th, I attended the Equity Advisor Committee, Parents of Color Committee, and Dr. Stubblefield gave an overview on the reopening, basically what we had talked about at the board meeting. Also, guidance, more guidance to come on truancy. A roundtable discussion is scheduled for September the 1st. And also talked about Douglas County Education Unified Command. And then David Cunningham talked about Title IX shared information regarding Department of Education regulations and sexual harassment, again, what we had talked about at the board meeting. August 12th, I attended the funding, the K-12 Frontline Education Philanthropy and the Response to COVID. It's a webinar on the impact of COVID on K-12 education and how nonprofits and philanthropists have stepped up in big ways, notable ways, to address critical needs, and also how philanthropy can address learning loss and provide mental health and support to our vulnerable students as a top priority. And then on August the 14th, I attended the Kansas State Department of Education meeting, which was a repeat of what they had shared previously the day before with superintendents. The topics they covered, private school, COVID-19 money distribution, the new gating criteria guidelines. And also, I've had a number of meetings and conversations with people in the community, so I appreciate everyone who's taken the time to contact me and the board. And also like to thank the district for all the work that they've been doing. It's been a lot, significant work. I just appreciate everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Others that would like to jump in?
Kelly, I have a couple brief things.
Great.
I also wanted to say thank you to all the community members who've continued to contact me and other board members Again, I want to reassure you that I've read every one of your emails. I'm just a little slow in responding to them all, but I'm working on it. I thank you, Kelly, for your comments in your president's commentary about our commitment to distance learning. I share the feelings that you expressed, both in the support for the course that we're on, but also in understanding the consequences and how this has been difficult for people in the community, for our parents and our students. And so I'm hopeful that our KU community will step up and do what they need to do to help us be able to move forward once we reach that point in time with our own decision making. On August 11th, I was happy to attend a permaculture garden proposal that was presented by students at Free State. I want to thank those students and the teachers and staff that have been supporting them in creating their plan, for sharing that plan. It was very thoughtful. It's a really cool plan for a permaculture garden space at the school, and I look forward to seeing how those plans move forward in the future. August 14th, GR and I had an opportunity to tour the construction at Lawrence High School for the first time since February, which was really exciting. We had a very small, socially distanced, masked tour of the ongoing construction. I'm really thrilled at the progress. It looks beautiful. You can really start to see how the changes, especially in the entry area, and the learning commons and the cafeteria, how that is really going to transform the way that school feels when you walk into it. And so it's very exciting to see that progress and all of that coming together. August 14th, so as a member of the executive committee for the Kansas Association of School Boards, and also being a member of the Policies and Resolutions Committee for NSBA, I participated as a voting delegate in the NSBA business meeting, which took place virtually on August 14th. That was a unique experience so far during the pandemic, to attend such a large gathering, voting gathering, and debate and voting on policies and resolutions that will govern the upcoming advocacy for NSBA this next year. I was happy to represent our state and speak on a couple of items at that delegate assembly. Thank you to Dr. Lewis and to Kelly and to Lindsay Buck for their comments at convocation. I really appreciated, Kelly, your message of support for our staff, and Dr. Lewis, your commitment to equity and your vision for the future in our district, and made me very proud to be a board member of Lawrence Public Schools. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. I ended up planting things from that permaculture thing that cost me some money, but I'm glad I went to it. Other folks?
Yeah, this is GR. I just have a couple things. So one, I'm going to echo Shannon. Kelly, I appreciate what you had to say in your board president comments, both on distance learning and, I'm not going to shy away or hide for my unending support for activities and athletics. And so I appreciate that support. I think, I'll stop there before I say something that I might regret. But I have full support of both the distance learning commitment that we made and also to also echo what you and Shannon said, that we made that decision fully aware of the impact that it would have on various members of our community, but we felt like it was important to have a decision out there that people could plan against. Being able to talk to different people and different friends across the country. I talked to a friend yesterday whose school start date is the same as ours, and as of yesterday, their school board, they met. So this is in a completely other state, but on Thursday, their school board met, and they announced that they were starting to have the discussions of what they were going to do when their school started September 8th. So they hadn't even decided if they were going to be in person, hybrid, or remote. And it just reinforced to me that while not everyone was happy with our decision. I felt like it was the right decision to make and the right time to make it. The tour at Lawrence High was impressive. The entryway, specifically what the new entrance was phenomenal. Especially having spent as much time in that building as I have, the transformation was to go from the old rotunda to the new entryway was it'll be quite a shock when you see it for the first time. That was really cool. And lastly, I will also thank everyone who has contacted the board for all your emails and your thoughts. I do read all the emails. I appreciate the comments and the thoughts that you offer.
Thank you, JR. Other board members?
I have a couple of things. I'll try not to be repetitive of what Erica had mentioned. I attended the Equity Advisory Recovery Team meeting on August 11th, and also attended the Equity Advisory Council, the first half of that meeting, and Erica gave a really good, really great summary of that. I also attended the Peaslee Tech Academic Committee, which we had the opportunity to review the course catalog for the 2021 year. And that feedback and suggestions, which Kevin Kelly does a great job of putting together, then those went to the larger Peaslee Tech Board meeting on August 20th. So that's what I have been up to. And also this afternoon, I had the opportunity and honor to speak with the tribal liaison for the 4 tribes who thought I would be interested in seeing the latest Governor's Commission on Racial Equity and Justice convening last Friday around school resource officers around that issue, and brainstorm how to outreach to the 4 tribes in Kansas. Thank you.
Yeah, hello, this is Carol. But yeah, I just want to piggyback off of Paula, but I am an enrolled member of the Kikwa tribe in Kansas. I am one of the 4 tribes in Kansas. So yeah, I want to thank Paula for her work, for just her intertribal work. But yeah, I have been going to the Equity Advisory Council meetings, and I've been listening to all the parents and responding to as many emails as I can. So thank you, and I've thank you.
Kelly, something that Paula mentioned about Peaslee reminded me, if I could just take one more moment. I wanted to just offer my condolences to the family of Dale Willie. He passed away last week, and I didn't want to miss the opportunity to say that and to honor him for the legacy that he has left in partnership with the school district in helping us to establish the automotive lab program that we participate in at Peaslee Tech. He was instrumental in the fundraising that helped us make that space possible for our students. And I really always appreciated his enthusiasm for providing a high quality experience for students who are interested in that field. And so I was sorry to hear that he had passed, and wanted to share that and say thank you to his family for his legacy.
Thanks for adding that. I was thinking about the number of people's lives he impacted in terms of job creation and development here in Lawrence. So thank you for reminding us to say thank you and be gratitude, or share our gratitude.
Kelly, if I could make one more comment.
Sure, please, Dr. Lewis.
I'll have to give a shout out to our technology department, Joe Smizer, working on the technology issues at the onset of this meeting. But not only that, the level of service that our tech department provides. The camera that you're viewing Paula on was a laptop that was personally delivered from here to her house by Zach Estes, one of our tech guys. And so we have, I guess, Uber for our technology department. If the technology is working, we're not working, we will bring a laptop to you. So thank you, Zach and Joe, for making that happen.
Oh, when we got the notice that he was delivering it, I thought Paula must be somewhere in the building. So it was kind of awesome to see that she was, in fact, at home. So that was cool. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, thanks, Zach and Joe. And I appreciate the standing next to me and opening all of the doors that I needed to get into the meeting. There must have been 20 doors to unlock.
So I appreciate
All
that.
right. So we now are going to move on to consent of the agenda. Do I have a motion? For the consent agenda, do we have a motion to adopt the items on the consent agenda? No, everybody jump.
I'm not good in sitting in silence. I move the board adopt the items listed on the consent agenda.
This is GR. I'll second.
Purdue Blackwood. Oh, you're on mute.
Yes.
Thank you.
Carol could be Blackwood. Yes.
All right. Gordon Ross.
Yes.
Kimball.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Hill.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to new business, and we will be discussing the furlough of food service staff. And with us today is David Cunningham, Executive Director and Chief Legal Counsel to the board.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to visit with you this evening about authorization to do a furlough of food service staff. We had this delayed so that we could gather some additional information. We've had an opportunity to review the situation and continue to be in a situation where food service, being a fee-based department, still is in a situation where they don't need as many people to deliver the limited number of meals that are necessary in this time frame. So we're seeking authority from the board to do a furlough of food service staff that are not necessary to provide the current meal service programming that is required, with the idea that as soon as students return to the buildings, we will then begin to bring food service staff back as we need to ramp up that program and provide meal service in the buildings. So it's fairly basic in terms of what we're seeking. It would apply to food service only, and those notifications would begin going out in the next day or so as we once we have authority from the board. Paula and her staff have been working with food service managers and the staff as a whole to explain what's going on and why. And while not necessarily the thing that we would like to have happen, they do understand the circumstances under which it is necessary to take this action. That's it.
Are there questions from the board?
Dave, do you know about how many employees we're talking about?
64.
Okay. Out of like 80?
76, I want to say.
Okay.
It's middle 70s, as I recall. I may be off a little bit, but it's around 76, if I remember correctly.
So does that leave us a certain number of staff who will be providing support for some meal services that are still supported by federal funds?
Yes, there would be 13 staff that are not being furloughed. That would include specific individuals working at the building level at those sites where we have meal service preparation going on. And then the central office staff. The central office staff will be supporting the building level staff, so they'll be out assisting in the buildings as needed as well. So Paula has been able to put together a team of 13 individuals that can provide the necessary services in the current environment.
This might be a question more for Dr. Lewis than for you, Dave. Because I understand that the authorization that we've had in place that's allowed us to provide expanded meal service during the last several months expires this week, I think.
August 31st.
Right. Would our plans around this furlough change if that expiration is put off. It sounds like there's not a lot of thought that they will extend that authorization, but if they were to do so, what would happen?
Then, and obviously, and for the public, what Shannon is talking about, our summer food program has been extended to August the 31st. When school starts, we will be operating under our child nutrition program, where those individuals that pay for lunch will pay for lunch. Those that are on free lunch will receive free lunch and reduced price. And so, obviously, to your question, Shannon, obviously, if we were given the latitude to extend that, and what I mean by that, extend meal services to all students, which I haven't seen any indication or heard of any indication that they will, but obviously we would need to probably need to bring those staff back, or some of those staff back.
Okay. And just to clarify again, that the reason why this is necessary is because our food service is a self-supporting, fee-supported program. We don't typically in a normal year support our food service program with funds out of our general fund or our local option budget, correct?
The goal is not to support from those other sources of revenue. So yes, it is a fee-based department, and without students in the building, we don't have the revenue. We're not preparing the meals. So obviously you don't need staff if you're not preparing meals. And the salaries are paid through the fee generation. So we're really not able to maintain a full staff because there's insufficient funding to do that, unless we, if the board were to decide to cut the budget in many other places, I suppose you could generate funds, but they still would not have work to do. Now, there might be opportunities. I've been asked this question: could we not find some work for them to do? And typically, a number of food service people will do other types of work in the summertime to continue their income stream. And we would probably be able to find some work for some of those 64 people in other areas. But our source of revenue for that would be out of the general fund or some other source that would have to then be reallocated. So it's a difficult position to be in when it's a fee-based department.
Kelly, I have just one more question. So does this allow then for the district to do kind of a mass filing for unemployment benefits for these employees?
Yes, we will take their names and submit them on a spreadsheet to the Department of Labor, which will expedite the process of them obtaining unemployment benefits. However, it does not relieve the employee of the weekly obligation to contact the Department of Labor and provide the appropriate information that is necessary for them to receive that week's unemployment benefit. So they still have a responsibility on a week-to-week basis to be in touch with the Department of Labor and make their claim filing, but we will initiate the process for them by doing the mass filing.
So that helps them start the process more readily.
Yes, it helps them start the process. Otherwise, all 64 would each have to file an individual claim, and then they would contact us and we would say whether we're going to challenge or not challenge. Obviously, we're not going to challenge this because it's a furlough that we're initiating. And secondly, by doing the mass filing, it speeds up that whole procedure.
Okay, thank you for that information.
And just as a reminder, their capers will not be impacted, nor will their health benefits be impacted. And then just to kind of put it in perspective, between summer and during their academic school year, we serve as many meals in a week as we do in a day, with our summer feeding program. And so you would think that, obviously we wouldn't need as many staff to do that.
Thank you. I was going to ask a clarifying question about the retirement and benefits, and I'm glad you clarified that. Other board members, do you have questions?
Carol, I don't have any questions.
Thank you. I have two things I wanted to point out. That when we initially had the conversation about the furlough, it was on our last 2 weeks ago, and Dr. Lewis asked us to pull it so that we could spend some time investigating, digging a little bit deeper to see what we could do to support workers, how we could help keep keep them engaged with us as long as possible. And I appreciate that the motion that's in front of us now has a much more specific, it's time bound, the scope is a bit smaller, and we'll be able to look at each group as we move through the next phases of remote learning and then into hybrid learning. So I appreciate that. I have a question. I think it was Erica who shared, or someone, one of my board colleagues shared that occasionally it can be challenging getting the dollars associated with furloughs. Is there an emergency assistance for staff that they could tap into in the interim if they needed to, Dave?
No. I mean, from a salary standpoint, do we have a pool of money? No, we don't have an emergency assistance program. Certainly, we do have an employee assistance program if there are if people need to deal with stress issues associated with a furlough and that sort of thing. They can get up to 6 visits without cost through our EAP program with a counselor if they need. And then there are also some other benefits associated with that in terms of budgeting, planning, and those types of things through the EAP. But in terms of a specific monetary fund that we can help people, we do not have that.
Okay, thank you. All right. Let's see. Other questions from board members?
This is Erica. So if this is for Dave, so if there's not a fund to help provide supplemental income in the interim, I guess there's 2 questions. One, will the mailing, and you can't guarantee anything, but would that be kind of a safeguard against the long wait that people have been experiencing? That's the first question.
The mass filing, I don't know whether that will avoid some of the delays that the Department of Labor is addressing simply because of the volume. It does help in terms of initiating the first filing, if you will, in terms of the department then processes everybody at one time. I mean, they have to do it on an individual basis, of course, because each one is a separate account. But it does let the department know that we are supporting the claim for unemployment in this situation. Normally, the individual would file. We then receive a report that a person has filed, and the department is waiting for us to respond as to whether we are going to challenge or not challenge that particular claim. That will avoid this step. So they won't have to send information out that the person has filed the claim and wait for a response. So that should improve the time frame in which they can begin to seek benefits. As it relates to the overall volume, I don't know that this necessarily helps that particular challenge just because of the volume that they're dealing with.
Okay, thank you for that. And so my other question is, if we don't have financial resources in the interim to help support these families, do we have resources readily available to communicate if they do have a hardship of local or otherwise other resources for them?
I do not have a list of community services that are available to them that we would, I mean, I've been here since 2007 and we've not furloughed anybody. So we've never compiled the social service types of listings that we would apply in other situations that relate to, of course, student discipline, for example. So no, I don't have that available. We can look into it and see what we might be able to push out to those individuals and make them aware of those other services. So we'll look into that, and if we can find a list of things, we can get that out to them. I can work with Paul on that.
Dave, I know for our families that we encounter, and I don't know the number off the top of my head, there's a number through the United Way that you can call that connects you to all of the resources.
It's 211. But it's not. It's probably not the best. I think there are some community partners who have, and United Way being one of them, that have compiled some resources in the way that Erica's talking about that might be a better fit than calling 211. But yes, that's the number.
Okay. We will see what we can put together and get that out to them. It may be a phase 2. We need to get the letter out to them first. That kind of gives them the outline of all the things that are happening here. And then that could be a phase 2 mailing that we would send to them.
Eric, I did in my comments tonight reference, and there again, this is just starting in the funds. I think right now maybe minimal. When I talked about the donation from Main Street, I think it's Main Street Credit Union or Main Street Bank. Yeah, Main Street Credit Union that donated some funds to our Lawrence Schools Foundation. And it was for the purposes of during the pandemic, those staff, because we have the I Can fund for our families. There was not a fund per se for staff that may be in need of utility assistance or temporary housing. And so as a result of the donation that was started by Main Street Credit Union, that's I'm sure the Lawrence Schools Foundation will continue to solicit support for that fund.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I think
Other
Erica,
questions?
And this is not a question, this is just a comment. I think Erica brings up a really, really good point, an important one for families and staff, that we should, as board members, have something readily available to push on to families that are have questions about where to access resources. So thanks, Erica, for bringing that up, but I think that's important for us to have as well.
So we will, whatever we send to the employees, we'll also send to the board members.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? I want to make a distinction that was made to me that I think is important for purposes of understanding. A furlough is temporary, and Dave, you pointed out a layoff is something that's more permanent. So we really are looking at right now a temporary time frame and hoping to bring people back as soon as we can, correct?
That is correct. The furlough is intentional in the context of being more temporary in nature. Obviously, depending on, you can look at businesses across the United States, and furloughs can turn into layoffs in certain circumstances when businesses are just not recovering. We don't anticipate that situation with the public school system. We do anticipate kids are coming back. We do anticipate the need for full meal service at some point. So yeah, as the students come back and the needs increase, we will be bringing the staff back as necessary. Once we move into a hybrid mode, we won't have a full complement of students in the buildings. We may not need as many initially until we're 100% back in the buildings. So that gives Paula the flexibility to bring them back, bring staff back as needed to perform the services to be sure that we're putting out the meals we need for students that are present, as well as those that might still be in the distance learning environment and qualify.
Are there other questions that board members have to help them make a decision? Okay. So we need a motion, and this motion's a little hard. Is there anyone willing to make the motion?
I'll make the motion, but I just want to say before I do that I do it with a heavy heart because I really care about every one of our staff members in Lawrence Public Schools as a board member. I do not take this particular action lightly or without just really feeling the import of the action that we're being asked to take. So I just wanted to share that. I move the Board of Education authorize the superintendent to initiate a furlough of food service staff during the 2020-2021 school year as needed due to the loss of revenue resulting from students learning remotely. I further move that furloughed employees be returned to work when feasible.
Is there a second?
Second, this is JR.
Kimball,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Hill,
Yes.
Kadu Blackwood,
No.
Gordon Ross.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-1.
Closing items. Dr. Lewis, do you have closing remarks?
No, we look forward to bringing the board an update at our next board meeting around our equity work. I think that's it for me.
So we need a recommendation to adjourn the meeting. Or motion to adjourn the meeting.
Oh, this is Carol. I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
A second? Do we have a second?
This is Shannon, I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, meeting adjourned. See you all in 2 weeks.
Thank you.